To enable multiple DLAP users to connect to your network simultaneously, you must have a modem bank, or also called modem polling equipment. This is appropriate connections to the local telecommunication provider and means of connectivity to the modem bank, such as an adapter installed on the computer that runs Windows Server 2008. Typically, the clients connect through a standard phone line, a plain old telephone service, an integrated service digital network, a digital subscriber line, or a cable mode. And then on the other hand, a VPN connection in Windows Server 2008 consists of a VPN server, a VPN client, a VPN connection, that is the portion of the connection in which the data is encrypted, and a VPN tunnel, which is the portion of the connection in which the data is encapsulated. The following two tunneling protocols provide this service and are installed with routing and remote access role. First one, the point-to-point tunneling protocol, or PPTP, is an extension of the point-to-point protocol that was in use for many years. PPTP was first used, if I'm not wrong, in Windows NT 4. In Windows Server 2008, PPTP supports only a 120-bit RC4 encryption algorithm, which is supported by default. Less secure encryption algorithm can be enabled by modifying the Windows registry. Please do not do it. And then, on the other hand, we have the Layer 2 Tunneling Protocol, or L2TP, which is an Internet Engineer Task Force standard tunneling protocol that is used to encapsulate point-to-point protocol frames for transmission over TCP/IP, X25, Frame Relay, or ATM networks. LT2P combines the best features of PPTP and the L2F protocol, which was developed by Cisco System. You can implement the L2P with IPsec to provide a secure encrypted VPN solution. In Windows Server 2008, LTP will support the Advanced Encryption Standard with 256-bit key, with 192 bits, 128 bit, and finally the 3DES encryption algorithm by default. Less secure encryption also, such as the data encryption standard, can be enabled by modifying the Windows registry, but as I said, please do not do that. Implemented by Windows Server 2008 Routing and Remote Access Services, NAT is a protocol that enables private network to connect to the Internet. The NAT protocol translates internal private IP addresses to external public IP addresses, and vice versa. This process reduces the number of public IP addresses required by an organization and thereby reduces the organization IP addresses acquisition cost, because private IP addresses are used internally and then translated to public addresses to communicate with the Internet. The NAT process also obscures private network from external access by hiding the private IP addresses from public networks. The only IP address that is visible to the Internet is the IP address on the computer running NAT. When NAT is used to connect a private network user to a public network, the following process occurs. First, the user's IP on the client computer creates an IP packet with specific values in the IP and TCP or UDP headers. Then the client computer forwards the IP packet to the computer running NAT. Second, the computer running NAT changes the outgoing packet header to indicate that the packet originated from the NAT computer's external address, but the computer running NAT does not change the destination. It then sends the remap packet over the Internet to the web server. Third, the external web server receives the packets and sends a reply to the computer running NAT. And fourth and final, the computer running NAT receives the packet and checks its mapping information to determine the destination client computer. The computer running NAT changes the packet header to indicate the private address of the destination client and then sends the packet to the client. After a user submits credentials to create a remote access connection, the remote access connection must be authorized by a Windows Server 2008 running the Network Policy Server, or else a third-party authentication and authorization service such as the Remote Authentication Dial-In User Services service. The remote access authentication consists on two steps. First, verifying the DL-in properties of the user accounts, and second, verifying any MPS network policies that has been applied against the routing and remote access server. The Microsoft implementation of Radius Server is a network policy server. Use a Radius Server to centralize the remote access authentication, authorization, and login. When you implement Radius, multiple Windows Server 2008 computers running the routing and remote access service can forward access requests to a single Radius server. The Radius server then queries the domain controller for authentication and applies the MPS network policies to the connection request. The concepts of authentication and authorization are often misunderstood. Let's remember that authentication is the process of verifying that an entity or object is who or what it claims to be. And an authorization is the process that determines what a user is permitted to do on a computer system or network. Naturally, authentication and authorization occurs only after a successful authentication. Again, an authorization occurs only after successful authentication. Additionally, most remote access systems will include an accounting component that will log access to the resources. Like I said before, the AAA, authentication, authorization, and accounting. In short, authentication proves that the user is who he or she claims to be. Authorization controls what resources an authorized user can and cannot access. And accounting keeps track of what resources a user has access or attempt to access. DL-in properties, which applies to both DirectDL app and VPA connections, are configured in the DL-in tab of the User Account Properties dialog box. If a user is DL-in to a domain, a user account that corresponds to the name sent through the DL app connection must already exist in the domain. DL-in properties for this account can thus be configured in Active Directory Users and Computers console. If the user is DL-in into a standalone server, however, the account must already exist as a user account in the answering server local security account manager, or the SAM database. DL-in properties for this account can thus be configured in the local user and groups console in the computer management. MPS can be installed on 3 general editions of Windows Server 2008. However, each edition has different levels of support and functionality. Enterprise and Data Center Edition supports the configuration of an unlimited number of remote authentication DL-in user services clients and Radius server groups. A Standard Edition supports 50 Radius clients and 2 remote Radius server groups. MPS is not supported on Windows Server 2008 Web Edition and is not supported on Windows Server 2008 running Server Core. The MPS console is a central utility for managing Radius clients and remote Radius servers, network health and access policies, NAP settings for NAP scenarios, and login settings. The console is divided in 4 nodes. First one, the Radius client and server. This section allows you to configure Radius clients and Radius server on your network. Second one, policies. This section allows you to manage and configure policies based on health, network, and access requests. Third one, network access protection. NAP provides a framework for protecting your networks, both public and private, from malware such as viruses and spyware. And fourth and final, accounting. This section allows you to manage how data is collected and logged from a remote access connection.